There were two duck hunters that were very, very close friends and had been for years. One of them was very, very positive and upbeat. The other was very negative, always critical and judgmental. Well, it's just about time for duck hunting season, and the one that was positive and upbeat, he bought him a brand new hunting dog that he was going to take with him to retrieve the ducks. And he knew that this old judgmental, critical guy is going along with him. And he just hoped that he'd be impressed with this new dog. So they're out there. Just as the sun starts to rise, in come the ducks. Both of them shoot. Two ducks drop to the water. The guy that owned the dog, he said, "Get him." And that dog took off. And he ran on top of the water all the way out to the ducks, grabbed the two ducks, ran on top of the water, and came back with them. He looks at his friend and he says, "What do you think?" He says, "Can't swim, can he?" Oh, all right, here are the notes, if someone will pass them out. And believe it or not, that little story goes along with our theme tonight, okay? Goes along with our lesson. In fact, I have it in the conclusion so that you wouldn't see it in the introduction, okay? The title of our lesson tonight is this: I am both the judge and the jury. Wow. There are individuals who manifest that kind of an attitude on some occasions. What is the key verse for our study? Well, let me ask you this. What's the title of our study on Wednesday night? It's been a couple of weeks. Taming the tongue. And the key verse is found in the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Okay? But guys, notice point B. Many times our tongues inject poison into our lives and the lives of others rather than life-giving medicine that brings healing. Is that true? Happens, doesn't it? Sometimes we're just not able to bring our tongue in control. And yet, that is exactly what James says that we have to do if we're going to be mature, complete, grown-up, perfect men. Notice what he says in James 3:2. For in many things we offend all. For if any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. So our use of our tongues is very, very vital. And so far we've looked at three evils of the tongue. The first one was using our tongues to curse. The second one, using our tongues to lie. And the third one, using our tongues too hastily. Okay? Speaking off the cuff, speaking too fast, speaking when we really don't need to speak. And tonight, the title of our lesson, as I've already said, is I am both judge and jury. Tonight we're talking about the tongues that are judgmental and critical of other individuals. So that's where we're heading in the course of this study. Let's notice a couple of things. First of all, let's start with the definition. You need a piece of paper. There you go. All right, let's look at the definition of a critical tongue. This comes from a book entitled Critical Spirit by June Hunt. June Hunt is a counselor, and she probably now has about 40 or 50 books out on various counseling issues. And the title of this book is A Critical Spirit, and she defines a critical spirit as following: assuming a superior role of fault-finding with a derogatory view of others. Okay? Now notice point B. The word criticism comes from a Greek word entitled kritikos. Does that sound like critic? It does. Okay. In fact, it is the very. All we do is bring the Greek word over into the English in order to pronounce it. Okay. And there is nothing evil in and of itself in the word kritikos or critic. Okay. It merely means this: able to discover or skilled in judging. But there's two kinds of judgments that we can render, aren't there? Two kinds of criticisms that can be rendered. And we refer to them as one, constructive criticism, and the other as destructive criticism, the fault finder. Okay? Notice how you can distinguish between the two. Constructive criticism involves fair judgment. Okay? Destructive criticism, on the other hand, involves unfair judgment. As I was studying the lesson, I looked up a few synonyms of this word critical or judgmental. Notice some of them that are there. Fault finder, a nitpicker, a critic, a complainer, a judge. There were two word pictures that were given in the course of the study that I thought were pretty good. Okay. One man said that if you are a fault finder, one of these individuals who is a severe critic of others, you have a porcupine personality. Okay? It's pretty good, isn't it? Oh, porcupine, what does he have? A bunch of quills that if they stick you, what happens? They hurt. Okay? This individual wobbles in with his little prickles, and guess what he thinks he has to do? He has to stick you, doesn't he? Okay, a porcupine personality. I thought that was pretty cute. Okay. Now the second one is the devil's sandpaper. Wow. Does sandpaper come in different varieties? There is. I don't know what you call it. Different scales, different numbers, or whatever, huh? Different grit. There you go. Different grit. Okay. And, depending on what you're wanting to sand, it depends on the kind of grit that you want, right? Well, those individuals who have the devil's sandpaper attitude toward others, they either do one of three things. Number one, they choose the wrong grit. Number two, they rub too hard. Or number three, they do both. How'd you like to be rubbed raw with the wrong grit for a long period of time? That's pretty rough, isn't it? Okay. Can you mess up a piece of wood by rubbing it too long with a piece of sandpaper? Oh, yeah. And can you mess up a piece of wood if you buy the wrong grit? Sure. Either way, folks, okay, it's not a positive thing. Okay, sandpaper's okay. Sandpaper serves a good function, but it can be detrimental. And the same way with our criticisms and judgment of others. They can be okay. They can be helpful. They can be a positive thing, but they can be extremely negative and hurtful to other individuals. When you turn to the Bible, you find tons, and I mean literally tons of individuals who were critical and judgmental of other people. Okay? And I've listed 4 examples in this particular outline, and we could spend the entirety of this lesson just going through the examples. Did you know that? That's how many there are. One of them is the man by the name of Moses. Was he ever criticized and judged by others? Yeah. Who is it that hurts the most when they judge you in a critical way? Friends, those that are close, family. Folks, the closer the person is and the more judgmental they are toward you, the more it hurts, right? Children of Israel are out in the wilderness wandering along. Moses has been chosen as the leader. And guess who jumped up first to criticize Moses and his authority? Miriam. And somehow she coaxed Aaron into it as well. And we read about it in Numbers chapter 12, 1 and 2. And Miriam and Aaron spake unto Moses because of the Egyptian woman who he had married. For he had married an Egyptian woman. I wish I knew more about that. Don't you? Because that's all the Bible says with regard to this Egyptian woman. There was something about her and this marriage that he had with her that caused them to speak against Moses. They didn't like this woman or something. I don't know what it was. I wish I knew more of the background. But here's what they say to Moses. And they said, Hath the Lord indeed spoken only to Moses? Hath He not spoken to us? Man. Critical. You're not the only leader of this camp. God's chosen me and He's chosen Aaron as well. I didn't read the last part of the verse. That's the scary part. You ready for it? Anybody got it? Did you turn to it? What does it say? Oh, and the Lord heard them. Oh, folks, be aware. Guess what? God is what? God is listening. And the Lord heard it. Wow, that's pretty potent. You can make a lesson on just those 4 words, couldn't you? Pretty potent. You turn over just a few chapters later in Numbers the 16th chapter. Let me ask you this. Since Moses and Aaron criticized Moses, it says Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses, do you think that may have opened the door for others to do the same? Sure. You know, if his own kin will stand up against him, thinking that he shouldn't be in power, well, hey, maybe we can do it too. So we find some individuals rising up in rebellion against Moses. Most of the time we talk about 3 men. Anybody know their names? I think I got it in the outline, don't I? Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Okay? Those 3 men. Now, there were 2 others that were a part of their leadership, and they went into the crowd of Israel and they conjured up 250 more men. Men who were well known, men who were respected. The Bible says men of renown. Now, folks, that's a bunch of folk, right? You're talking about 255 men standing against how many? 1. Just Moses. Okay? And they said this, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. Critical. Judgmental. Who are you to be leading this group of people? What about us? We turn just a little bit further in the Bible and we come to the book of Job. And guys, you know, is it kind of sad when you beat a man when he's down? And let me tell you what, I'm glad that I don't have Job's friends as my friends. Okay? On one occasion, he referred to them as pitiful counselors are ye all. Okay? In other words, if you want to, you can just go home. Okay? But yet they're called Job's friends. Job's gone through a lot of trouble, hasn't he? He's lost all his family. He's lost all of his riches. And now his own physical body has been afflicted head to toe with boils, hasn't he? And now these friends arrive. They sit around looking at him, sitting on his ash heap for about a week before they say a word to him. And they should have just what? Kept sitting. But all of a sudden, chapter 4, they think they have to talk. And so they do. And I want you to listen to what Eliphaz says, probably the oldest, in his first speech. Remember, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent. What's happening to Job, folks? He's perishing, isn't he? Whoever perished being innocent. What's he telling him? You done something wrong. You're not innocent. Now, man, you sitting there about to die. Got boils all over your body. You're scraping your body with a pot's herd. And they telling you you're not innocent. Or where were the righteous cut off? Even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. Job, you're guilty. No critical spirit. They had absolutely no idea what was going on in the life of Job. And yet just because he was afflicted, just because he was going through these bad problems, they accused him of being guilty. You turn just a couple of chapters over into chapter 8, verses 3 and 4, and I want you to listen to what they say. Did God pervert judgment, or doth the Almighty pervert justice? Now watch this. If thy children have sinned against him, and he hath cast them away for their transgressions. Wow, who's he bringing up now? Bringing up his own children. How many did he lose? Lost 10, didn't he? 10 kids he lost. And the first thing that they think they have to do now is what? Not only were you guilty, but because your children died, they too were what? Transgressors. You need to fess up to it, Job. Come on. Fess up to it. Confess your sins. Had Job done anything? Folks, where was the war going on? Yeah. The war was going on in heaven. And Job doesn't even know what's going on. Does he? He has no clue what's going on. Okay? This is a war transpiring in that outer realm. Remember, we talked about that in a lesson not long ago. There's an outward realm out there that you and I don't see and don't know what's going on. And that's what was happening. You know, oh, Job told God, if you'll just curse Job, if you'll just afflict Job, he'll what? He'll curse you. A man won't serve God for naught. So all of these false accusations. Wow. Look at the next point. Folks, the Lord was criticized by the religious leaders of His day. Look at that little note that I have out there. The Pharisees found fault with the faultless Son of God. And you want to know what? If Jesus were walking on the earth today, guess what? Somebody, even within the church, could find fault with the man. I'll guarantee you. You know that? He wouldn't be what they think He ought to be. And they would what? Criticize Him. They criticized Jesus in two big areas. One in His relationship with God, and one in His relationship with mankind. Okay, and I gave you two lists there. And you can go home tonight and read some of those. They criticized His use of the title, the Son of God. In fact, the very moment that He said that God was His Father, they instantly wanted to kill Him. You've made yourself equal with God. He used the phrase Messiah. He used the phrase Son of David to refer to Himself. His authority to forgive sins they criticized. The claim to exist before Abraham. Who are you? Did they criticize Him when He ate and drank with sinners? Luke 15, verses 1 and 2. Folks, that's the very reason that the story of the prodigal son was given. Did you know that? Because Jesus was a friend of sinners, they said. Okay? And so they criticized Him for that. Did Jesus uphold the traditions of the elders? Did He follow those? No, folks, those weren't the law of God. Those were the law of men. Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the fathers? Not the tradition of who? God, the tradition of the fathers. Did He always abide by their thinking and their interpretation of the Sabbath day? No. And He was criticized for that. And I didn't go and show all these verses, but did the Pharisees go out and look for things to find? Oh, man. Yeah. Folks, it's just constant, right? They tempted him, right? They searched out. They were looking. Every time he turned around, there was some way that they wanted to criticize this man who referred to himself as the Son of God. Critics. What about the Apostle Paul? Man, did he have his critics? Oh, yes. One of the worst books written against the Apostle Paul, and we don't talk about very much, is 2 Corinthians. Okay? Now, 2 Corinthians is a wonderful book halfway. Okay? 2 Corinthians was written after what book? 1 Corinthians. Was 1 Corinthians a pretty wicked letter to the Corinthians? Yeah, pretty wicked, wasn't it? All these problems, all this division, all this trouble in the congregation, right? And so Paul sent Timothy to see how things were going, and Timothy comes back and he says, Paul, you're not going to believe it. The church has listened to what you said in that letter, and they've changed. In fact, even that man who has been in adultery and fornication has repented. Man, would you feel pretty good? Yeah. And then Timothy says this, but, oh, no, don't want to hear this. But false teachers have come into this congregation, Paul, and guess what they've done? They've criticized your ministry. They've criticized you as an apostle of Jesus Christ. They're doing everything they can possibly do to defame you. And this book is filled with all these statements that these individuals have about the Apostle Paul. And I just listed some of them. He's fickle. He said he was going to come, and then he's not going to come. Fickle. None of us ever change our minds about anything, do we? His bodily presence is weak. He writes terrifying letters. He is not a good speaker. Boy, right there's where the church would have problems with him. You know what? That old Paul, he's dull and boring and dry. He can't speak worth a flip. I don't want to go down there to that church and listen to that dude teach class tonight. I can hear it. Okay? Folks, Paul was knowledgeable, but guess what? He wasn't an eloquent man. Okay? But he was brilliant. Okay? But see, we don't like that, do we? That old preacher. He does not accept support. Now, boy, I can't imagine a church criticizing you for that. Can you? I bet they weren't elders or treasurer. Notice this, though. He uses others to take money from the Corinthians. Wow. Notice that last one. He was beside himself. Unbelievable, isn't it? You know? Just unbelievable. Now, notice point number 3. Who do we criticize? Well, we criticize a lot of folks, don't we? Okay? And I've just given a list there. Is it easy for us to criticize our enemies? Oh yeah, we love to criticize our enemies, right? You know? We do everything we can to make our enemies look just as bad as they possibly can. Okay? It blows my mind. But we do, don't, and that's just part of who we are as people. But notice this next one. Those with whom we're angry. Some of the most hurtful, mean, ugly comments that I've ever received have come from, guess what? Angry brethren. You know that? They get upset with me. And so they got to make some unbelievable statements about me. You know? And that's just part of the business, isn't it? Just part of the business. How about this next one? Those with whom we're jealous. Next door neighbor gets a new car. Then he adds on an addition to his house. Then he gets a swimming pool. He's got to be broke. Probably got all that debt, doesn't he? I wonder where he gets that money. I heard he might be doing a little something on the side that may not be just what it needs to be. It's unbelievable how we think. How about this one? Those who threaten us. Those who we don't even know. That's easy, isn't it? You know? Man, we see people on TV today, and guess what we think? We think that's the person, don't we? That's the person that person is. Yeah, on TV, they just appear so wonderful, don't they? Boy, all the jewelry and all the perfect dress and hairdo, and everything's perfectly in place. And man, this car and this house, and they, it seem like they got a wonderful marriage. They always showing their kids, and everything just seems so goody, right? And so we take that image, and maybe it could be a negative image, couldn't it? There's a little bit negative that we hear about some individuals. Miley Cyrus is not my favorite singer. I don't know about you. She just doesn't thrill me whatsoever. But I don't know, guess who? I don't know Miley Cyrus. I only know her from what's reported to me in the media and what I see on TV of her. You know that? I don't know the girl. What if I ever got to know her? I might like her. And I might be able, at that point, rather than all the harsh criticism and the negative, guess what I might want to do? At that point, I might be willing to offer positive criticism, right? Okay? Rather than just the negative stuff and just down on her all the time. Okay? And so, those that we don't even know. How about this one? Those who challenge us, either for good or bad. Most people don't like to what? Don't like to change. And so somebody comes along and challenges us, and guess what? Ooh, we just give them down the road, don't we? Who is he? Thinks he's going to come in here for a couple of years and just change everything? Who is he? Boy, I tell you what. It's easy to be critical, folks. So easy. Notice point number 4. Why we... Oh, yeah.
A lot of people who believe bad things happen to bad people. Bad things don't happen to good people. That's the same attitude that they have.
Yeah, and in fact, in a little bit of defense in Job's friends is that was the prevailing thought at that time. Okay? That was taught universally. That bad things happen to bad people, good things happen to good people. The gods, if you're doing well, will bless you. The gods, if you're doing bad, will punish you. And that was a worldwide phenomenon back then. That was the ideology. But like Larry said, people still have that concept, right? Something bad happens, and the first thing they say is what? Yeah. What have I done? God, why are you punishing me? I must have done something.
Why me?
Yeah. Why me? Ugh. Yeah, but see what some people will say is the tornado came and wiped out your house because there had to be something in your life that was bad and God was dealing with you. And see, now that's a false concept. Okay? But there's people who think that. Okay? That, it was even, when 9/11 happened, wasn't that a response that came out of 9/11? America is getting what it deserved from God. We've become so unmoral and immoral and such a bad nation that God was punishing us. Really? How do we know that? Okay? How do we know that? There's just things that, sometimes we just run with ideas that we don't know that are true. Notice point 4. Why we become critical and judgmental. One, folks, is just our pride. Just pride. Okay, we'll get to a verse in a few minutes that talks about that. Notice this next one. We want to control others. See, I want to be on the lashing end, right, with the tongue. And so I'll lash you into what? Into submission, right? Can you do that? Oh yeah, it happens all the time. There's a constant desire for control. But even we ourselves can do it, can't we? We're gonna bring somebody in control. We're gonna bring somebody in submission, and we know the way to do that is to what? Be judgmental, critical, and make all these statements about them so that they'll do what we want them to do. Okay? I remember I was talking to a member of the church one time, and he just had a habit after every lesson almost coming up to me and arguing about something. I mean, he just had to argue about something. And, guys, I take my job pretty serious, and before I get in the pulpit, I don't get up there half-cocked. I'm not up there letting the Spirit move me, okay? I put in hours thinking about this stuff before I get up there, okay? And I do my best to make dead certain that I know my position before I get up there, okay? Now, that doesn't mean I'm perfect, but, you don't get up in a place at half-cocked, okay? And so if a person after a lesson comes right up to me and I've just preached the lesson, what do you think I'm going to do? Oh, you're right. Everything I said was wrong. If you honestly think that, guys, I just presented the truth. I just put in 15, 20 hours of study to make this statement. Okay? Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to hold my position, aren't I? I'm going to try to defend my position. That old guy, man, he wasn't going to let it go. And like I said, he did it on a regular basis to me. And finally, one day he just looked at me and he says this: "We've argued over a lot of things, and you've never changed." And I just looked at him and I said, "Neither have you." And he hadn't. He hadn't changed a thing, and he never changed my, but it's just unbelievable. See, he wanted to control me. I want him to do what? I want him to admit one time what? That he's wrong. And boy, he'd have walked. I got him once. I made him. He'll probably put it on his calendar. Okay? Probably got marks on his suit pocket right here of all the preachers that he's brought under control. Unbelievable. But that's what we try to do to individuals. How about this next one? A poor self-image. Sometimes I'm critical of others because I don't feel good about myself. And I believe that if I put down another person, that makes me what? Wonderful and good. Folks that don't do nothing but make you worse. Because not only are you still where you were, you're also a severe judgmental critic of others. It doesn't help you one iota. You just added to your baggage. But you see, we think it makes me feel what? Better. And then last one, sometimes we are judgmental and critical out of anger. We talked about it the first, this word kritikos, and it being a positive word, or at least it can be. And folks, I just prepared a list of the difference between constructive criticism and destructive criticism. Okay? And there's a lot of contrasts between the two. Constructive criticism is helpful. Destructive criticism is what? Harmful. Constructive criticism is thought out. Right? I've got to talk to this person about this. I need to think about what I want to say. See, it's thought out. Destructive criticism, though, is oftentimes just what? Hastily said, right? The other one is constructive criticism based on facts. Destructive criticism is also oftentimes based on fiction or feelings. Notice point 4. Constructive criticism usually addresses a key area of a person's life. Okay? I have been very critical at times of my children, even after they've been married. I've been critical of them. But it's usually not about everything. It's usually about what? One thing or two things that I see, that I sincerely believe, as a dad, somebody needs to talk to them about. Okay? And it's just, you're trying to be constructive in your criticism. Now, that doesn't mean they take it well. Okay? But you just try to be constructive. But see, the other one, destructive criticism, you just nitpick what? Nitpick everything. Okay? Did you see his pants? He didn't press them breeches. Did you see his hair? He needs to learn how to comb his hair. Where does he go to get his hair done? His teeth are brown. I mean, it's amazing the junk that we can say about people to put them down. You know it. Hey, they're his teeth. If he wants brown teeth, go have brown teeth, man. You know? Who cares? But see, once we start it, it's everything. Constructive criticism is occasional. Destructive is constant. Constructive criticism, it should say does love. I'm sorry, does love. Not does not love. That's terrible, isn't it? Destructive criticism is done in anger and spite. Constructive criticism, you try to do how? Privately. Okay, you take the individual aside and you talk to them privately. Deal with the situation. Okay, but destructive criticism, guess what? Sometimes we never even talk to the who. To the person, we just tell everybody else about how terrible that person is. Constructive criticism involves remorse for the person. Destructive criticism, we joy over the other person's faults. Sad, isn't it? Constructive criticism forgets the past. Destructive criticism reminds the person of the past all the time. Constructive criticism elevates the other person. Destructive elevates myself over others. Constructive criticism is forgiving. Destructive criticism has no mercy. No mercy. Several passages of Scripture, guys. The very first one is probably the most prominent one. Judge not that ye be not judged. Notice that there's not a period after judge not. There's a comma. Bible says judge not. No, it doesn't. See, not there. Judge not that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye? But what? But considereth not the beam that is in thine own eye. How long wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine eye, and then thou shalt see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. A lot of lessons there, aren't there? We judge the little things in others, the whats, the motes. See the little things. Creases in breeches. Right? The way a person talks. The fact that he's country. See? The little things. We also judge others when, guess what? We have bigger things in our own life we really need to deal with. We have what? Big old beams. Right? And Jesus says what? Don't go around casting out motes till you first do what? You gotta get rid of the beams, folks. Notice Proverbs 11:12. He that is void of wisdom despiseth his neighbor, but a man of understanding holdeth his peace. Proverbs 14:3. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of what? Pride, the Bible says. Pride. Remember that a while ago? One of the reasons that we criticize and judge others is what? Our pride. Mouth of the foolish, there's pride. But the lips of the wise shall preserve them. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Folks, look for the good in others instead of just the bad in others. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works. Folks, I don't want to provoke you to anger. Okay? I want to provoke you to love and good works. Point B in the conclusion, Instead of being critical, that point A, that's the joke, okay? You got that on record. You won't forget that one maybe. Instead of being critical, we need to become encouragers. Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Exhortation instead of what? Oh, judgmental, critical spirit.